Eric Sorenson here from Easton's CollegeBaseballToday.com with Nebraska coach Mike Anderson. Coach, thanks for braving the gridlock traffic on a weekday here in Los Angeles.
Anything for this weather.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's true too. This guy kind of, if there is such a thing as a hero to me in college baseball, it might be Coach Anderson, just because I grew up in Omaha and a big Nebraska fan, and he's been a part of now 3 teams that went to the College World Series. So let's start with this. Now, you go back as far as the early 90s with the Nebraska program, even back to the John Sanders days. How was it that you, like, what happened, what transpired that you went from Sanders' staff to Dave Van Horn's staff before you became the head coach? How did you stick on there?
Well, I was pretty fortunate. You know, John Sanders was a good man and got hired through John. And then when there was a transition, our staff was let go, and Dave Van Horn kept me as an assistant coach, which was great. And it allowed me as an assistant coach to stay in one place, worked with Coach Van Horn and his staff, and really started building that program in the direction we wanted to go.
Now, did you have a relationship with Coach Van Horn before that?
I didn't. You know, it was unique. Got to know Coach Van Horn, and about a month into the process, he called me into his office and says, "Don't sell your house. I'd like to keep you." And that was his way of saying, "Hey, I'm gonna keep you around." And that relationship has grown, and Coach Van Horn and Coach Childress, who came in, have been great friends and colleagues, and that relationship continues. It was a real special time.
Yeah, it's unique. You usually don't transition from one staff to another. Talk a little bit about now going from Sanders and Van Horn. What did you learn from those 2 coaches before you became head coach? How does that translate to your job now?
Well, tremendous amount. They're very good mentors, and got to be around good people, good kids, and in a Division I program that had a lot of potential from the very beginning, and then a lot of energy. Coach Van Horn brought a lot of energy to our program with a will to win. You know, and again, I always use this thing, Coach Van Horn and Coach Childress, who's the Texas A&M head coach at this point. We had a very strong bond and really worked well together and learned a lot. Those coaches were mentors for me.
Now, you touched a little bit on this. Talk about I know there's the obvious things like the Buck Belzer Field is now Haymarket Park. Talk a little bit about what all has changed in the program from the mid-90s to now.
Boy, there's been a lot of changes. A lot of changes.
Keep it brief if you can.
We played at Buck Belzer. We averaged about 200 fans per game, and now we average over 4,500 per game at Haymarket Park. The city of Lincoln, the University of Nebraska, and J. Maple, a private donor, got together and put this great facility. It was one of those things, if you build it, they will come, and they have.
Yeah.
Our Husker fans are unbelievable. They're one of the best supporting baseball groups in the country. And so we had a lot of things happen. I think another huge factor that happened for us is we changed our recruiting base quite a bit, and we started focusing on Nebraska first, then the Midwest. We have a lot of Midwest kids, and there's a lot of loyalty. There's a lot of honor that's built into our program. Those kids want to do well for Nebraska. It's a team concept and a team, they do a great job of building that team in the Nebraska way.
And that actually touches on to my next question, is about, now starting from the top, say the top at Nebraska, how has that seeped down into the high school baseball in the state of Nebraska? What have you seen change since you started there?
Well, we'd like to think that it's had an impact. I know when I went to Nebraska in '94, we had 23 high school baseball teams. We're right now around 44. We've got 2 different classifications. But I think one of the biggest things that I've seen change is the youth baseball baseball facilities, the high school baseball facilities, the quality of coaching that we have. Our high school coaches are very good. You know, we'll have a high school day, and all those coaches will show up for our days, and we've got great bonds with them. The coaching, the quality of kids has really improved, and it's been nice to see. I've been there 15 years, and there's a lot of increases of things that have happened.
Yeah. Now, this also leads into the caliber of player that you guys recruit now compared to back then. I'm assuming it's been raised quite a bit then.
It has. You know, and you still, Midwest gets a little bit of a knock. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of kids from the Midwest that make it to the big leagues, that make it into primetime college baseball. The only difference is they might take a little bit more time to do it. They may not have that year-round baseball that everybody else is playing, but their quality and their work habits. Well, you can't question the Midwest. You can't question the Nebraska kids' work habits. They're going to work their tail off, and that's what I love about our recruiting base that way.
Now, okay, let's talk a little bit about the current team now. I know last year was a little bit of a down year for you guys, obviously. What has changed from last year's team to this year's team? What have you seen different from this year's squad?
Well, you know, last year we had a difficult time. We got hit by the draft probably worse than I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
We lost 8 pitchers to the draft. That got us pretty good. I always say we kind of got punched in the nose. And, you know, we went through the same process this past year. We had a lot of our kids drafted, high school kids, and then from our program too. And it just sifted out, and this year it worked for us. So we've got a lot of young pitchers, a younger staff, but we feel great about them. And you know, in comparison, the nice thing is we never became dysfunctional, even though we struggled a little bit last year. We stayed together with a bond. We had a great bond. And this year's team, with the pitching, with some experienced pitching, and with an offense, I think that can get going. We've got some good potential. I'm very excited about this group.
Now, part of that leadership is DJ Belafonte is a player that seems like he's been there since the late '80s or something like that.
Yeah.
Talk about his experience, what he brings to it, and some of the other players that are leaders on the team.
Well, you've got DJ Belafonte. You've got Tyler Farst, who's an All Big 12 performer last year. Adam Bailey, who had 12 home runs last year and did a great job. Those guys have carried us. The key for our team's success is that we have leadership at the top that takes us through the beginning of this year and allows some of our younger guys to get going. DJ and Tyler and Adam Bailey are great. They've been strong additions from the position side of things to help us lead. And DJ especially, he's been there 4 years. He had a tough year last year. Started off beginning of this year. He's done very, very well, and anticipate him doing well throughout the year.
Now, talk a little bit about the pitching now. I know you got Mike Nesseth back after getting drafted really high last year. Talk a little bit about him and Sean Yost, some of the frontline guys, and what you expect to carry over this year.
You know, our frontline guys are unique because last year they had to be thrown into roles that they weren't ready for. By losing so many people, our staff was decimated by the draft, and so we had guys that were put into starting roles that probably weren't ready for them. We had guys on the backside. Now these guys have gone a full year of experience with this. So Sean Yost and Michael Marriott and Michael Nesseth, those guys are in established roles. They'll get better and better with it. But now we've got those younger guys that are feeding off that. And you know, some of these guys that were drafted and signed, we went through that same thing where they signed last year. This year they're with us. And it's kind of a crapshoot.
Oh, sure.
Most college coaches know this, but this year we got a little bit fortunate, and we'll have some kids for a longer period of time and a long term versus last year where we lost them.
Now, touch briefly on what you expect. I know it's early now, and you haven't had much outdoor practice, and it's shown a little bit on the field. Talk a little bit about what you expect will be the team's strengths and weaknesses as the year goes on.
I think first and foremost, our pitching depth will be a strength.
Okay.
When we get into the flow of it, we've got some strong pitchers. We don't have that dominant number one, but what we have is a lot of guys that can line up, a core group of freshmen that we think are going to be dominant throughout the years. Maybe not this year, but they'll work their way in it. So our pitching depth is very good. Our offensive discipline, our offensive attack, I think is going to be very strong. And so far, just in the beginning of this year, we've played very strong defense. So you take those three aspects, if we can just get to the top of each of those, I think we're going to be a strong club. It's
always nice to have a good defense, even when you haven't had much practice outside. So.
Absolutely.
Last question, who was better, Darren Erstad or Alex Gordon? Ready, go.
No chance of me answering that question.
Okay.
Those are two good friends, too, to this day. They were both exceptional. Like I said, they're both good friends. There's no way I'd compare them. The unique thing about that, Darren Erstad came to a practice when Alex Gordon was a freshman. And Darren came and said, I heard you've got a pretty good freshman. And he looked across the infield and he says, that's him. And he pointed him out. And I said, how could you tell? And he goes, you could just tell.
Is that right?
He knew. Darren knew. Darren's got a great eye for talent. But both those two kids are pretty unique kids.
This is one guy that believes in the power of red, and for the Husker Nation, that's always a good thing. Coach, thanks for coming out today.
Appreciate it.
Are we going to talk a little bit more? Because I have something else I wanted to bring up with him.
You can do that.
Okay, all right. Coach, I was wondering if you could sign my motorcycle helmet.
No way.
I was just if you could get a marker and you could just sign it for me, that would be really appreciated.
Are you kidding me right there? That is phenomenal. You kidding me?
I know. I'm a geek.